Diary, and just continuing with what I was saying when I was outdoors last time in the thick of it in South Yorkshire, and I just wanted to just elaborate a little bit more on some of the details behind what I was talking about, because obviously it was very impromptu, and video diaries are they're a bit like that, aren't they? So I was just going to say that there's a whole area of information, almost like an untold history in this country, and there's bits of it out there if you do enough research, that relates to this power grab and this land issue that I was just touching on. And one of the important things that I've become aware of, and it's new for me. I'm not really an expert in this area, but this idea of the enclosure movements of the 19th century, and the way in which land was taken from common people or common folk, as we would call it, or peasants. And this has been going on right throughout history. It's a huge area, and it relates to other parts of the world as well, like in as much where land was taken from native cultures, native people, through acts of government, and through just direct theft of land, literally enclosing on land and sealing it off and making it out of bounds, and then tying that up in legal issues through the so-called justice system to validate it into law, a law of the land as such, and common law and all these things. And I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not pretending to be an expert on common law and all those sort of things, because I'm not. But what I'm finding interesting is the history behind it. And when you look at the figures and the statistics, and also from a metaphysical point of view, the idea of the land and the power that I was mentioning in the other part of the video diary being interconnected, and where we've given our power away in a way that we are now no longer accessing the land like we used to do. We're almost living the false economy, or the false illusion that other people talk about, the illusionary daily life, or toil as we call it, is really evident in all of the detail that we take for granted in everyday life, like paying taxes, paying mortgages, and all the rest of it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is that there are other ways of looking at it, and interestingly enough, when you look through history, it's been talked about a lot. So what I was talking about when I was outdoors last time was this idea of how land had become private, and of course, I haven't got time to go into great detail, but it's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. And one of the things that we realized, look at the statistics I was talking about, and one of the things was the idea that only a fraction, a small amount of people, families to be precise, owned all of the land, or great swathes of the land in this country. And I'm sure this applies to other countries as well, and as you see. So one of the things that got me interested in looking at this is something that relates to what we know in history in terms of the enclosure movements, and the enclosure movements that were acts of parliament that were passed during the 19th century. And I think there was something like 15 separate acts passed between 1845 and 1882, something like that. And it's fascinating when you look at this, because what happened was, gradually land, as we would understand it as common land, was stolen from the peasants, from people, in various ways. But one of the ways that it was done was through physical acts, by actually turning up and fencing off and stealing. Obviously then what came into effect after that was the idea of using the law and the justice system to sign, seal and deliver this. So basically anything to do with grazing livestock, meadows, hay, common land, all of those things were taken away from people. In other words, their livelihoods were taken away. What interested me the most when I was doing some research into this was that some of these great stately homes, aristocratical homes, not least places like Blenheim Palace, which is not far from here, where I'm based, was created. Much of it, the land was taken via the Enclosure Acts. So literally, the land was stolen from people to to give a small majority of landowners extreme control and wealth, of course. And you look, well, the biggest landowners in the country are the Buccleuch clans and the Buccleuch family empire, which is absolutely huge and connects to the Montagu family. And the Montagus, of course, were intermarried with the Rothschilds, surprise, surprise. So all of this land issue, especially around Scotland and all of that stuff to do with Scotland and the Scottish rites of Freemasonry all interconnects with it. But yeah, it's a fascinating subject. Only the Buccleuchs, they created the peerage of Scotland. The peerage of all of that land ownership, and that started in the 1660s, I think. But you look at their coat of arms and their symbolism. It's full of all of that esoteric stuff, like most of these heraldic devices are. So yeah, I think it was I can't remember exactly, but it was one of the Montagus. It might have been Louis Montagu that was, along with Lionel Nathan de Rothschilds, and with some others, started the Zionist League of British Jews. And not that is interrelated with the enclosure movement, not at all, but it is in some ways, because the common denominator here is that land was gradually grabbed from people, working people, and handed over to these elite aristocratical families. And of course, land has been bought by offshore companies. When you do the research, you find that they're all interlinked as well. So it's no surprise when you look at this that the world that we've inherited now in the at this time, and the amount of control and what we would understand as debt slavery and being a slave to the rat race and the system, not least through the monetary system, which is interrelated and connected to all of this. You're looking at a society which has been built on stealing and grabbing land and other assets as well, no doubt. And you go back through history again, and you look at other countries, as I said earlier, and you've got some interesting things going on there as well, where land was taken from native populations through different acts of parliament or acts of government. The stealing of land from the Indians in America, and so on and so on. And this has been going on all over the place. So the blueprint for this, and the way in which these families have operated, has always been to take land, because they know that the true wealth, in terms of spiritual and creative and physical wealth, comes from a connection to the land. If you remove that connection to the land, then you're more or less turning a person into a slave, which is exactly what we've got today. And the situation today is much more serious, because it's dressed up as being okay to own a property and to own a little strip of land, and to be at the mercy of a tax system and a monetary system that is built on the backs of our own slavery in as much. So